I enjoy playing ping pong. Sometimes the people think ping pong is not a real sport, but
That's just because they're bad at it.
maybe that's true.
Soy Alex Holloway
Soy Héctor Monterroso.
y estás
invitado
invitado
a
a
Róbate mi sermón.
Okay, so thank you so much, Bishop Hector, for being on Steal My Sermon. Tell us a little bit about yourself and where you are right now.
Thank you, Alex, for inviting me to participate in this program, in this show. I'm Hector Monterroso, and I am a bishop assistant in the Episcopal Diocese of Texas. I am in Houston, and part of my job is to oversee the southern region of the diocese. That includes Houston and Galveston.
Okay, wonderful. And right now we're filming from the clergy conference of the Diocese of West Texas, where I am and where Bishop Hector has been serving as a chaplain at our conference at Camp Capers. So it's been nice to spend a couple days out in the Hill Country.
Yeah, it's wonderful to be here. It's good to see all the clergy and the good energy here in the Diocese of West Texas.
Yes. Good. Okay, so I thought we would begin today with the Old Testament. And of course, we're doing track 2, and so the Old Testament and the Gospel are very closely related. And Jesus is actually quoting from our Old Testament reading. So we can talk about both the Gospel and the Old Testament. But I did a little bit of reading about the Deuteronomy lesson, and I wanted to share some of what I learned. So the Deuteronomy lesson contains part of the SHEMA, which is the Jewish confession of faith. That's made up of this part of Deuteronomy, and then another part in chapter 11, and then a section from Numbers. And my sister, Erin, is Jewish. She converted to Judaism, and she lived in Israel and married an Israeli, and so I called her to ask about the Shema and to tell me about it. And it was really interesting. She said that you're supposed to recite the Shema in the morning and the evening, so kind of like how we do morning prayer, evening prayer. And it's so holy that when you say it, you cover your eyes. So that was kind of interesting. But so it begins, "Hear, O Israel, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your strength." And then it goes on to say, to tell the Jewish people, say it when you rise and when you lie down, inscribe it on the doorposts of your house, teach it to your children. So really just emphasizing how important it is to remember this most basic teaching of the Jewish faith, which is that God is one, which was unusual in ancient times, of polytheism. For them to say God is one was a profoundly radical statement. And then to love God, and that was the heart of all of the commandments in the Torah, is to love God, and then, as Jesus later adds, love your neighbor. And then I also learned, have you ever seen in a house in Israel or in a Jewish person's house, the mezuzah on the doorway? It's that little container of a scroll that they put on their doorpost. And inside that is the Shema, is this written out, because it says to put it on your doorposts, and so the faithful Jewish people touch it as they go into their house and as they leave, as a constant reminder to love God with all their lives, which I thought was cool. I also read a really great article by a rabbi named Joshua Sachs, and my sister sent me this, and I really liked it. And he talked about how the beginning of the Shema is, "Hear, O Israel," and that is really important in setting apart the Jewish people. So he says that in ancient cultures, like the Romans and the Greeks, were visual culture. They were all about art, sculpture, theater, physical beauty. And Jewish culture, or Jewish religion, holds that God is so holy that no art could, capture God's beauty or God's holiness. So Judaism is a religion and a culture of listening. So I have a quote that I'm going to read, and I'll put it up on the video as well and link the article. So this is from Rabbi Sachs. In Judaism, faith is a form of listening. That is what Moses says time and again in Deuteronomy. Stop looking, listen. Stop speaking, listen. Create a silence in the soul. Still the clamor of instinct, desire, fear, anger. Strive to listen to the still small voice beneath the noise. Then you will know that the universe is the work of the one beyond the furthest star, yet closer to you than you are to yourself. And then you will love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your might. And then he points out that when Moses spoke with God, he didn't see him, he only heard him. This is Deuteronomy 4:12. Then the Lord spoke to you out of the fire. You heard the sound of the words but saw no form. There was only a voice. And so I thought that was interesting to think about, because I think we have a very visual culture, especially with our iPhones and computers and TV screens. And to think about faith being not about what we're seeing, but about what we're hearing, and how that might change what we expect of God, like how we expect God to speak to us or show up to us. I liked that perspective.
Yeah.
So, Jesus picks up on this theme and on this direct verse in the gospel. So let's talk about the gospel a little bit. Anything in particular kind of stand out to you in your reading of this gospel?
Sure. I think there is some in the gospel is the most important. Is our core value. Yeah. The commandment. Yeah, and how that commandment is the most important part of our belief and obedience. Yeah, and I think this is the main idea for me. Yeah? Immediately when I read the gospel, the image of obedience, to understand, to value, core value appears in my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting to think about love God and love your neighbor as the two pillars of our faith, and that mirrors the 10 Commandments. That the first 4 commandments are about loving God, and the last 6 commandments are about loving your neighbor. And so it's really, the whole law, all the commandments can be summed up in just those 2.
Exactly. Yeah, and to think about the positive way to love our neighbor. Yeah, because in the 10 commandments, in the original 10 commandments, it's like in the negative way. Yeah?
Right.
Yeah.
Do not steal.
Yes.
Yeah.
But in the Jesus interpretation and teaching is more positive way.
Right.
Yeah? Yeah, and I love that.
Yeah. Just potentially more challenging.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, more challenging. Because and like always Jesus is teaching is not thinking in the same way that the world is teaching us.
Right.
Yeah. And it's not about hate, but it's about love. Yeah. It's not about to prohibit some, but it's about to take the initiative.
Yes.
To transform. Yeah, and I think that is challenging. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's our call. Yeah, that is our call. Not to judge, but to love. Yeah, to transform, to invite. Yeah.
Yeah, I liked what you said about taking initiative, because it does put a lot on you. Because it's not just like I can sit here and do nothing bad and I'll be okay.
Exactly.
It's like I have to get up and go love people and love God, not just a little bit, but with my whole heart. And it's a very demanding commandment. I mean, that's why you can try every day of your life to love God and love your neighbor and still be learning how to do that, at the end of your life. It's,
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is very important, and I think that is the way we are called to understand. Yeah, it's true. Maybe it's when in a difficult situation I can stay and do nothing, or I can take the initiative and forgive and to reconcile.
Right. Yeah.
And to pray for that situation. Yeah, and I think Jesus is calling us to take that initiative, not to be more active
Right.
in the things we are doing in terms of faith, in terms of obedience and call.
Yeah, exactly. So you are preaching this at a, what kind of visitation are you doing on this? It's Halloween Sunday, so is it a confirmation or just a normal Sunday service?
I am not sure if I am going to have confirmation, but I'm going to be in Trinity in Houston, downtown. Yeah, and I think I'm going to preach about this commandment, to love God and to love your neighbor. And I am because my ground is to do something practical, something practical in my job. Yeah, as a precision mechanic, always I am looking for to do something with my hands, or involve my body doing exercise or something like that. Yeah, and sometimes it's difficult for me to preach if I have not story to tell or something related with my own spiritual journey or a faith story from a different person. Yeah, and I'm going to preach about an experience I had in my previous work in Central America, in Costa Rica. And as you know, I am originally from Guatemala, and I worked in Guatemala as a priest, as bishop in Costa Rica, and general secretary for Latin America, for some countries in Latin America. And I have learned from many spiritual experiences in my life, visiting those countries. Yeah? And I'm going to preach about. I'm going to use the story that I experienced in Costa Rica, and it's about when I was there. I received a terrible news from one of the churches in the diocese. The priest, one of the priests there, the parish had no more money. Had no more money to pay his salary. And I received that bad news. Yeah? A good pastor, a good priest, a good preacher, teacher, very dedicated man. But the parish had no more money to pay his salary. And it was a very difficult situation. I tried to support him. I tried to find resources in the diocesan budget, but we had no money to pay his salary. And that was almost during the Christmas time, difficult time, and I had no solution in some way. Yeah. And it was difficult for me to say to him, a friend, a person working with me, we cannot help you.
I'm sure.
Yeah? And I decided to reflect, to think, to pray, trying to find a solution for that situation. But it was very frustrating for me because we had no resources to help him. And being unemployed for a priest in the diocese of Central America is hard because it's only one diocese in each country.
Right.
And no job means no more Episcopal churches to have a work. And And that means that person, it's necessary for that person to travel, trying to find a job in a different country.
Right, and
But-
uproot their family.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the immigration process, permits,
Yeah.
takes a long time. And I decided to stop and to pray and to reflect about the situation of my brother priest. And I went to my office looking for a quiet place and looking in different documents and I found an article from a friend in Brazil, and I read it, and in that article he wrote about this passage. Yeah, his article said something like this: "Two are the most important commandments: to love God above all things and love your neighbor as yourself. There are many ways to love your neighbor. Only one way to love God, by loving your neighbor." Yeah, and that second part of this reflection caught my attention. There are many ways to love your neighbor. Only one way to love God, by loving your neighbor.
I love that.
Yeah, and I am sure that the message of this article was a manifestation of the Holy Spirit for me, to remind me that solutions to the most significant problems begin with the small actions, full of love and solidarity. And sacred scripture is full of these examples. Yeah, when we do not find the path or think that there is no solution to our problems, God surprises us. And that reflection provided me an idea. And the clergy meeting would happen soon. And I thought that by sharing the situation of our brother, I could find advice and respond to the need of our brother, priest. In the meeting, 20 priests attended the meeting. In our conversation, I shared with the clergy present about our brother's situation. And during the conversation, I launched an invitation, somewhat daring and perhaps fruitless, that we would consider taking a percentage of our salaries, and with that contribution, create a wage for our brother for 6 months. And the 20 who attended agreed to contribute 5%
Wow.
of our monthly salary and create a wage for our brother. You know, when we added the contributions, the compensation we made was slightly higher than our brother's previous salary.
Wow.
And I think Jesus always acting this way, yeah? Surprising us and giving us more than we ask or need.
Right.
Yeah. And the other way, I think, was talking about the lesson of the commandments. I think the easiest decision in that situation is do nothing.
Yeah.
Okay.
What can I do?
Exactly.
Yeah.
We have no budget. We have no money. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that is and maybe that is how the world work.
Right.
Yeah. But we are in the world, but we are not acting that the world acts.
Right.
And I think we took that decision, and we helped him for 6 months until he got a new job.
Wow. That's so amazing.
Yeah, no, I think And this is the lesson.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? How we can love
Mm-hmm.
God if we are not enough good to sacrifice a little bit to love our neighbor.
Right.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm going to preach about that.
Yeah, that's a great story. I preach on that too. I could steal it.
Yeah, this is the idea.
Exactly. But yeah, the word creativity is coming to mind. That that was a creative solution. It wasn't really obvious. It probably hadn't ever been done before in those dioceses, I'm
Yeah.
guessing. And that kind of goes back to what we were saying, that it's not just don't do bad things, but actively seek out ways to love your neighbor and ways to love God. And that might mean coming up with something that's never been done before, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is a lesson about many of the problems we face can be solved with generosity, and justice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and using the most significant gift that we have received from God,
Mm-hmm.
His transforming love.
Right.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and through this small act of faith,
Mm-hmm.
we can contribute with a life transformation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and when that happens, we make a connection with Jesus and the gospel,
Mm-hmm.
because everybody who had experienced an encounter with Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
their life transformed.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that is the most important part of our Christianity and ministry and work.
Mm-hmm.
How we can contribute with a life transformation,
Mm-hmm.
using our skills and showing God's love.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You talk a lot about using our skills to
Mhm.
serve God, and you've told stories that I love about using your own soccer skills, chess skills, basketball skills to plant churches and help children and help people's lives be transformed by Christ. And I think that's one way you could sort of preach off of this lesson would be we're all called to love God and love our neighbor, but that might look really different. You have a mechanical engineering background, I do not. So the way that you are going to use your gifts to serve in the church is probably going to look really different than the way I will.
Mhm.
But that's something that we celebrate in the church as our different gifts. But that we can all work together towards that same goal of loving our neighbor, but use our different gifts and passions and things that we enjoy. It's not, I think that was something I took away from both of the Old Testament and the Gospel too, was this isn't a burden. It's not the commandment to love is not like a rule or a heavy commandment to take. It's a joy. Like when we love, we experience love too. We experience the transforming power of Christ, and so it's a joyful obedience. It's not like obeying, a teenager obeying their parent, like that kind of thing. And I actually read Rabbi Sachs said something about that too, that in biblical Hebrew there's no word for obey. Like it doesn't exist. They've made one up for modern Hebrew, but that there's no word in ancient Hebrew for obey. It's only listen. So that's where the word Shema actually comes from. It's the word for listen or hear, O Israel, Shema. And so he talks about how an obedience that comes from listening is totally different than an obedience that comes from, like a Marine drill sergeant to a boot camp private or whatever. And as a parent, a lot of times that's the lens I see the world through is, as a mother. And it just had me thinking about how Elizabeth, my daughter, who's 2, I want her to listen to me because I love her. Not because I want power over her, because I want to be, in charge or whatever it is. I want her to listen because I don't want her to run in the street, or I don't want her to go down the stairs by herself and fall, whatever it is. And so that the way that God commands us, listen to me, you shall love God and you shall love your neighbor. It's a commandment of love that's for our own good and not just some sort of arbitrary, checking of a box, but that God desires our thriving, and so that's why we're commanded to love too. That we benefit from it as well as our neighbor.
Exactly. Yeah.
I thought it was interesting too that the commandments are in order 1 and 2. So first is love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. And that, I think that means that our love of neighbor comes from our love of God because our neighbor is made in God's image. And that expands who our neighbor is to any human being. Like any person who might look totally different from us or be from a different culture or situation, that if we truly believe they too are made in the image of God, then we treat them like we're meeting Christ.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes if we are expecting results immediately, we are not thinking well. Yeah. If we are doing something to show people Jesus, and we are not receiving the results immediately, that is not our expectation. Yeah, that is not the good way to think. Yeah,
I think that's hard for clergy.
Yeah, no, I think it's hard. Yeah,
Yeah.
Sometimes but it's like the kingdom of God is like a mustard seed, right?
Right.
It's not necessary to have the results right now.
Right.
But it's growing. It's a process to grow, and at some point it's going to be big. Yeah?
Yeah.
But we need to be faithful about we are doing our ministry and our work. We are called to show God's love, and God is going to be in charge to continue that process. Yeah? I think that is... we are concerned about numbers, about statistics, about results, but again, that is how the world works. Yeah, but it's important for us to think in a different way.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think all of us, we are in the same page. Yeah, concern, anxiety. We went back to normal, but I think this is a great opportunity to make some changes. Yeah, because we always talk about how important it is for the Episcopal Church to change some of our not tradition, but some of the work we are doing, because it's necessary to change it. But now is the opportunity. Yeah, it's the opportunity, and we need to learn and how to use the technology, how to use our pastoral care, how to be more involved with the community, how to encourage our people to practice solidarity. Yeah, and all these components are part of the commandment.
Right.
Yeah? How we can love our neighbor. Okay, we have this opportunity now. Be connected to them. Yeah, learn about their needs and actively work to support them.
Yeah. One thought I had was, I don't know if you've ever heard of the 5 love languages. Are you familiar with that?
No.
It's kind of like it's a popular book. I think it was written by Gary Chapman, and there's a website with like a little test you can take, and it will tell you what your love language is. So the 5 love languages are quality time, acts of service, gifts, words of affirmation, and physical touch. And what Gary Chapman talks about with kids, because you don't quite know them yet, is you try to hit all 5 love languages. So, I try to think with Elizabeth, am I spending quality time with her? Am I telling her I love her? Am I, giving her hugs? All those things. So one thought I had for a sermon that is maybe a little bit corny and not as profound as your stories, would be that how do we love God with using the 5 love languages? Because I think sometimes when I think about loving God, sometimes that can feel a little bit abstract, like how do I love a God that I can't exactly see or touch? So I was thinking, you could run within a lot of different directions, but quality time with God is, prayer and worship and making that a priority. Acts of service is serving your neighbor, volunteering with your church, things like that. Words of affirmation might be prayer or writing notes to someone, an encouraging note to someone you love. Anyway, I think that that could be a direction you could go into. Like you say, I like practical things as well. Like give me some homework in my sermon, and I think that's one avenue that you could go down.
Yeah.
Now you need to find out what Sandra's love language is.
I will. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that is important. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that practice starts at home, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's important for us to practice that the God's love and in our own home.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and from that point to the rest of to the neighborhood and to the rest of the world.
Exactly.